scholars within their tradition that are much more knowledgeable about theology than any of the Muslims that I've met. I mean, there's still Muslims that know the basic texts of the theology, but in terms of really thinking deeply about a lot of the problems that we are confronted with today, because whether we like it or not, we have to deal with the fact that we're living in a world that has introduced ideas. Evolution is a theological problem because it's a problem that deals with cause and effect, and it deals with the origin of our species, and that is where we came from, how we were created and who created us. And it needs to be studied at a very deep level, and then it needs to be looked at. And if it has merits, then those merits need to be identified. And if it has things that are incompatible with our theology, then that needs to be pointed out in a way that can be understood. I mean, one of the things, there's one of the great scholars of the 20th century, Sheikh Muhammad Ramin al-Shinqiti, when the first news of the moon landing came, all these people went to him, scholars, and he was living in Medina at the time. They went to him, and they asked him what he thought, because traditionally, in all the early tafsirs, the moon is in the heavens. وَجَعَلْنَا الْقَمْرَ فِيهِنَّ. We put the moon in the heavens, and the heavens are considered to be blocked, and that Allah prevents anyone from penetrating the heavens without permission, and the Prophet ﷺ was given that permission, and the jinn were prevented even from getting outside and pelted on, according to the Quran. So he was asked about that, and he said there's two possibilities. One, they didn't get there and they're just lying, and two, we've misunderstood the Quran. That was his answer, and that's the answer of a real scholar. And so what happens is, when you get new information that is apparently not consistent with your understanding, either the information is incorrect or your understanding is incorrect. And that needs to be assessed and understood, because we shouldn't end up like these people that think the earth was created 7,000 years ago on October 17th. You know, really, I mean, that because they become the laughing stock of the modern world. Islam has never been the laughing stock of anything. That was always the power of Islam, is that it never shied away from debate and from intelligent discussion. Muslims were never fearful of Christian proselytization, because they always, that's why the Christians could live amongst the Muslims for centuries, and they weren't threatened by them. They never felt threatened by them. And the fact that we even feel threatened by Christian proselytization now in the Muslim world is a sign of the loss of real scholarship and real deep understanding of our tradition. And Dr. Omar gave a talk in California which was called "Stop Where They Stopped and Then Proceed," which is a statement by one of the Shadri scholars. قِفْ حَيْثُ وَقَفُوا ثُمَّ سِرْ. Stop where they stop and then move on. And that's one of the things that we have to do, is we have to first find out where they stop and then move on. But the idea that Mark Twain said the ancients stole all their best ideas from us, and there's a lot of truth in that. I mean, this idea that there's really a lot of new issues is often very false. It's what happens is those old usul al-kufri have different permutations. That's all it is. But you're dealing with some basic fundamental problems. Most of them, in terms of philosophy, all the issues, the basic issues, were dealt with by Plato. He asked all the questions in those writings. And the same is true with theology. I mean, you can't get around dawr wa tasalsul. Those two problems, which are chicken-egg problems and infinite regress problems, you can't get around them. It doesn't matter how sophisticated the jargon becomes, you're still dealing with two essential fundamental problems when you deal with where did all this come from. It's either dawr or tasalsul, or there was a creator, an originator, who's not subject to the laws that this universe are subject to, like entropy and other things.
A couple of people wrote, I'll read two of them, which highlight related questions, and perhaps we can hear from both of the scholars. The first one is, if Iman and Islam are separate, can someone have Iman without Islam? If so, can people with just Iman go to Jannah? On a related note, somebody writes, how about the possibility of having intellect with morality, but without religion? That is, righteousness centered around humanity in a moral sense, rather than God in an eternal sense?
Iman and Islam are separate and the same. And that's important because Islam is a rubric that encompasses Iman at one level. When we talk about Islam, we're talking about, because our deen is called Islam. And then the deen falls into the three categories of, and really four: Iman, Islam, Ihsan, and then the signs of the end of time, which are the four dimensions. The length, which is the Islam; height, the vertical, horizontal, which is the Iman; and then depth, which is Ihsan; and then time-space, which is the historical inevitability of the end of time. So within the tradition, Islam encompasses all those things. But when we speak about Islam as being the outward manifestation of Iman, then Iman is actually the rubric under which Islam is subsumed. So it depends on which way you're looking at it. Allah says, "Inna deen 'inda Allah al-Islam." He doesn't say al-Iman. But then, "Ya ayyuhal ladina amanu," not "Ya ayyuhal ladina aslamu." And at one level, the words are synonymous. Al-mu'min wal-muslim. There's a hadith, which is a very powerful hadith for me, because I thought about it quite a bit, which is al-muslimu man salim al-muslimun min lisanihi wa yadihi. The Muslim is the one who Muslims are safe from. But then he says, wal-mu'minu man amina nasu min bawa'iqi. But the mu'min is the one that human beings, humanity, is safe from. So that adds a dimension to Iman, that a Muslim is working at the horizontal level, whereas the mu'min is on that vertical level, which is a much deeper understanding. And that's why the Quran says, "La taqulu amanna, walakin qulu aslamna." Don't say we believe, but say we're in Islam. وَلَمَّا يَدْخُلِ الْإِيمَانُ فِي قُلُوبِكُم. Because Iman has not entered your hearts yet. Lemma has not entered into your hearts yet. So there's an indication that you can be a Muslim and you're not a mu'min. And then when Allah says about the person that was hiding his Iman, He says, قَالَ رَجُلٌ مُؤْمِنٌ مِنْ آلِ فِرْعَوْنَ. He didn't say Muslimun. There was a believing man from Ali Fir'aun who was hiding his Iman. يَكْتُمُ إِيمَانَهُ. He didn't say يَكْتُمُ إِسْلَامَهُ. And so there's an indication that somebody who's in a state of Iman and there's no outward signs of that Iman. And Allah described him as a mu'min. And that's why, there's a proverb the North Africans say, "La tahqiru abdan asan yakun lillahi waliya." Don't hold any human being in contempt because he might be a wali of God. Don't assume that you know people's reality. And that's why it is haram to specify the hellfire for any human being. Any human, you cannot say you're going to hell. And there's a hadith that says that the people that say that, Allah will actually forgive the person that He condemns to hell in front of him and tell him to go to hell. And that's a sahih hadith. So it just depends on how you're looking at it. But generally, Islam is the overriding rubric under which Islam, Iman, and Ihsan are covered. So you can look at Islam as the Sharia, and then Iman as the haqiqah of the Sharia, which is your reality of it, and then the Ihsan as the tariqah, the path that those two move along towards their Lord. There's a lot of different ways to look at all of these things. And then if so, can people with just Iman go to Jannah? The definitive verse on that is that Allah will not forgive shirk, and everything other than shirk, He can forgive. You're in the Mashi'ah. You're in the will of God, and it's only shirk. And even this is something a lot of Muslims don't even know. It's not any shirk, it's shirk once you've been given knowledge. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the first commandment in the Quran is "I'budu rabbakum," worship your Lord. The first prohibition is وَلَا تَجْعَلُوا لِلَّهِ أَنْدَادًا وَأَنْتُمْ تَعْلَمُونَ. Don't make idols وَأَنْتُمْ تَعْلَمُونَ. That's called a jumla haliyah. In other words, your state in making those idols is that you know now that your Lord is one. So the shirk that Allah doesn't forgive is shirk done with knowledge of Allah's unity, once that truth has come to you. So even the mushrik, according to the Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, the dominant opinion is they are actually saved until the truth has come to them and they reject it knowing it's true. And Imam al-Ghazali, and I think, it's an amazing insight of his. He felt that if Islam came in a distorted manner, that the people were not held to account. And he felt that children that were raised believing that Islam was evil and the Prophet was a Dajjal, that they also would not be held to account. And he was recognizing the sociological reality of filters. Because we know this now. It's very difficult to free yourself from programming of childhood. And also, another really interesting proof for that is in Surah An-Nuh. You see, people